All right, so we're going to spend some time talking about selections and making selections. The majority of the time that you're working in Photoshop, you're doing selections. Um, I'm going to open up this file, lesson two, selection tools. It's just a JPEG file. And before I start making selections, I just want to make sure that all of our screens essentially look the same. So similar to in Illustrator, where you can change the different modes that you're working in. I'm going to stay in Essentials. And again, just to make sure that we all have like the default settings, I'm just going to reset my Essentials. And again, I just want to make sure that I'm there. I'm going to minimize the screen by clicking the double arrow, just so I have a little bit more room to work. And I'm going to be using this entire image in different parts. So just for now, I'm just going to focus in. I'm going to zoom in on this top left corner. Just focus in on this part. And I'm going to click on the rectangle selection tool right up here. I just want to make sure I have like the same default settings, or just make sure you have the same default settings that you have up here. And I'm just going to make a simple rectangle. Right. As soon as you make the rectangle, if you hit the delete key, the first thing that it's asking you is if you want to delete these pixels, what do you want to fill them in with? So if you hit OK, it's technically deleting them, but it's essentially just replacing those pixels with a different color. It's not exactly what I want to do. I want to permanently delete these pixels. So I'm just going to come up here and go to Edit Undo. And just to make sure that I can actually delete the actual pixels, the reason why it's not letting me, if I go over here to my layers, it's because my layer is currently locked. So it's not allowing me to delete the pixels. So if I double click on the lock symbol, it's now unlocked. So I'm going to minimize my layers. Going to come back here, make a new selection, and if I hit the delete key now, it's now deleted the actual pixels, and I know it has because I have this checkered background. If I want to get rid of my selection tool or the current selection that I have, I'm going to just come up here and go to Select, Deselect. And the one thing that I want to pay attention to is my shortcut. Right? I'm on a Mac, so it's the Command D. But if you're on a PC, it's Control D. And just become familiar with the fast way of deselecting. So just for now, I'm going to go to Select, Deselect. And I've now deselected that selection. So again, I'm going to make another selection. And just to make sure that I know the shortcut, hit Command D or Control D. And, just to make another selection, another way that the selection tool works is if you make a selection and you want to add to your selection, you can also hold down the Shift key, and you'll see that you're on your mouse. You'll see a little plus sign on the bottom right, and that way you can start to add to your selection. So now I can see that my selection is slightly different. And again, if I hit the delete key, it's now deleted those pixels. I'm going to hit Control D, make one more selection. This time I'm going to hold down on a Mac the Option key. On a PC, I believe it's the Alt key. And now I can see I have a minus sign right next to my mouse, and it's essentially subtracting from my previous selection. So I'm going to make a few clicks here just to subtract from my previous selection, and now hit the delete key and Command D or Control D if you're on a Mac or a PC. So just some very basic ways of using the selection tool, right? Just by adding to your selection, how to deselect, subtracting from your selection. And one more thing, just to very quickly mention, since you see some of these icons up here, you could also click on these icons. So if you have your selection, you click on that icon, and now you see the plus sign. It's a way to add to a selection, way to subtract from a selection like we just did. Or again, you can just hold down the Shift and the Option key. The last one just to very quickly mention is the feather tool. By default, I always leave this at 0, and I always change the feather afterwards. But just to show you what it does, I'm going to change this to 10. I'm going to make a new selection. And you can see that my rectangle is not a true rectangle, right? It's now actually feathered. So if I delete it, it's not deleting it in a very clean way. So what it's doing is, because I have 10 pixels selected, from this selection line, it's going 10 pixels in one direction and 10 pixels in another direction, and it's doing like a soft transparent deleting of the pixels. Right. I always leave this at 0 to deselect the pixels afterwards. So let me put this back to 0. I've deselected my previous selection, and I'll make one last selection over here. Normally I just leave, if I want to use the feather tool, I make my selection first, and then I go and I change the feathering after the fact. Right, so I go over here to select, modify feather. And the reason why I do this is I never know which feathering I want. So if I say I want a small one, I can do 5, hit OK. I can start to see what that looks like. Or if it's not really what I want, I can just always change it afterwards. Say 5 is too small. Actually, I really wanted 25. And now it changes it. So again, I just always leave this at 0, and I always change it after the fact. And in the next couple videos, we'll be going over some more selection tools.